Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to John Dudley Speaks. I'm your host, Optimus Prime. Iconic new metal outfit turned alternative rock statesman Linkin Park are undeniably extremely important to how mainstream rock has evolved over the last 20 years. At the height of the new metal craze of the late 90s into the early 2000s, where groups like Limp Bizkit, Slipknot, Korn, and System of a Down all reigned supreme, Agora High School classmates Mike Shinoda, Brad Delson, and Rob Borden formed the band Zero with Joe Hahn and Dave Farrell, which morphed into the group Hybrid Theory upon the recruitment of vocalist Chester Bennington. After signing to Warner Brothers, the label attempted to shift the band's stylistic vision, even pushing them to change their name to Linkin Park. But Bennington and Shinoda's versatile back and forth between hip-hop and rock wasn't meant to be dulled or restrained, but championed. The aptly titled Hybrid Theory was released in late 2000, and today it's just as grimy, edgy, and kaleidoscopic as it was when it came out. The aesthetics on Crawling, One Step Closer, In the End, Points of Authority, and Forgotten are all encompassing, making for a bold, propulsive, and lively listening experience. 2003's Meteora was a similarly dynamic work of neo-rap metal and alternative, boasting a bigger, more atmospheric wall of sound with hits like Numb, Somewhere I Belong, and personally to me, what I think is one of their most underrated hits, Breaking the Habit. But the record expertly balanced the hardcore elements from the band's nascency through rap rock smashes such as Faint and Lying From You. After a successful live album and a collab EP with Jay-Z of all people, Linkin Park returned in 2007 with Minutes to Midnight, an alt-rock record that I feel demonstrates the band's appeal through accessibility and heart, despite its broadening of its metal stylings. 1,000 Suns in 2010 took this foundation and applied experimentation over top of it, delivering at that time what was their most controversial record yet. Until this day, I still respect it for its creativity in storytelling and world building, and its embrace of grindcore and death metal amid its pop sensibilities. The early to mid-2010s were an interesting progression for the band, with Living Things and The Hunting Party pulling from the intensity and straightforwardness of the band's first two records. But to me, I love how the experimentation of the form still lingered in folky songs like Castle of Glass and stadium rock hits like The Final Masquerade. But then we got One More Light in 2017, and while it received an obscene amount of hate at the time due to its strong pivot into millennial pop, I really don't think it's bad. In fact, I enjoyed the scaled-back approach and the heartfelt lyricism. The hate train was vicious, cruel, and unwilling to see the positive behind such a change. Of course, it was at this time following the record's release where we tragically lost Chester Bennington way too soon, and this is still one of the heaviest losses that we've ever endured in music history. The future of Linkin Park was uncertain for many years, but it appears that they're back with a semi-new lineup, with the major update being Dead Sarah's Emily Armstrong joining the band as a lead vocalist. While she already has had some public hang-ups and issues in light of strong and warranted social media scrutiny, the question has been, can Linkin Park carry forward the same amount of energy that they used to have in this new format? And on From Zero, they're able to tap back into a spirit that feels comfortably familiar and dynamic, but periodically bland and predictable. With production primarily from Mike Shinoda himself as well as Brad Delson and new member Colin Britton, this is a pretty intimate, close-knit affair, which does allow the record to thrive in its consistent aesthetic. However, it's not long until that aesthetic loses its surface-level appeal. I'll admit, I wasn't exactly a fan of the singles for the lead-up to this album, particularly because of the flat mixing and the watered-down sound that has plagued most of Linkin Park's releases since Rick Rubin produced Minutes to Midnight, and that does extend to the remainder of the track listing at times. The vacuous Call of Duty soundtrack sanitization of Heavy as the Crown can also be found on The Emptiness Machine. The bleeded out worship on Cut the Bridge didn't hit the same, and the generic alt-rock of Over Each Other feels like it's missing key musical components to make it feel whole. And honestly, at this point of the record, I was kind of unimpressed. However, the next track was when I was finally starting to see major glimpses of a more interesting version of this new Linkin Park, one that wasn't trying to play to the stadium seats, but instead was frankly not giving a shit. Casualty is one of the hardest mainstream metal tracks this year, and the mix is so dirty and raw and overblown in the best way, emphasizing grit and defiance over grandiosity and spectacle. Then the synthetic touches of Overflow are a perfect tonic to the previous track, indulging in a 21 Pilots millennial pop pastiche that I feel like captures what One More Light was trying to capture in 2017. Two-Face is also vintage Hybrid Theory Linkin Park, and it totally rules, fusing its hard rock edge and new metal angst as wondrously as they used to. So although Mike might swing too hard into the arena rock glamour of their past successes, it's when you do just a fanfare for something a little bit more unwieldy that this production becomes immediate. To focus firstly on arrangement, I think it's important to call out the structure of a lot of these tracks, mainly because that's where this record's writing tends to suffer. Like I said, there's a hint of Call of Duty radio-ready rock embedded into the fabric of these songs, so you can pretty much predict how a song's progression is going to pan out, which is admittedly underwhelming. To offset that hang-up in terms of the element of surprise, I think that the themes that are explored on this record are great and full of genuine nuance and exploration. The Emptiness Machine executes its classic Linkin Park formula pretty well, speaking on emotional suppression, which is still, after all these years, such a relatable conflict, one that shouldn't just be relegated to teenage rebellion. Casualty excellently pays respect to one of the hardest Chester Bennington vocal performances ever with Keys to the Kingdom, but also tastefully builds off of the themes of that track, with a flip-side view that's resolute and confident, unwilling to compromise or take damage. From Zero works best when it adopts this type of attitude, and then shifts back to something more aspirational like On Good Things Go, detailing anxiety and vulnerability in an unflinching sense that feels refreshing. Therefore, when Linkin Park finds solace in discussing these broader topics, but also fuse it with their forceful energy, the magic is still there and it keeps us connected.
Let me out! Set me free! I know all the secrets.
Obviously, the big point of conversation around this rollout has been the addition of Emily Armstrong to the band's lineup, and I have to say she definitely lives up to the sky-high expectations that were bound to be put on her from the beginning. I mean, she is following the legacy of one of the greatest rock vocalists of all time, so it couldn't have been easy to step in that role. That being said, I find her and Mike's vocal performances to soar when the same level of ingenuity meets the same level of emulation. Casualty could have just harkened back to Chester's screamed vocals, but paired with Mike's strained verses, you get a sense of palpable horror and unease. That only translates because the performances are so complementary to each other. The band does a great job of melding the old and the new, with Joe capitalizing on his programming flourishes, as Phoenix and Colin keep the rhythm chugging along pretty nicely. And because of that strong foundation, Brad's guitars boom with ferocity, and Mike's tinkering with styles comes across as lively, like on Overflow. It's a progressive metal band remembering that they are a progressive metal band, but taking what they've learned in this massive 20-year journey and applying it with finesse and attention to detail.
I give you everything I have! Yeah!
My main gripes with this album are centered around the first half, mainly with the blandness of The Emptiness Machine and Heavy as the Crown, so it's a choppy introduction to a track listing that focuses up brilliantly in its midsection. When the record steers into that polished yet hardcore vibe of Linkin Park's sound, it's infectious and suspenseful, not to mention an absolutely exciting listen that you don't want to end. The back half with Two-Face, Stained, I Give You Everything I Had, and Good Things Go finds this new lineup on a total rampage, almost like they're realizing what works for them together in real time. So once we reach the final notes of this album, I really do feel like a new identity has been born for this band. And just like they've been able to push the envelope in the past, it's exciting to peer through that window of what they'll be capable of in the future, all in 30 minutes and some change. I don't think Linkin Park has one bad album, and From Zero continues that trend once more, and although it doesn't come close to the heights of their first 4 records, or even eclipses their highly underrated 2010s output, it doesn't need to because it really is its own thing. And honestly, that's awesome. It's a thoughtful comeback record that pays tribute to the legacy of the band, while at the same time looking forward to its future. Something that fans can really admire, and I would love to hear more and more records from this new lineup. Maybe even a 100% hardcore record, because that would kill. But hey, that's just my perspective. If you're a Linkin Park fan, you're gonna really enjoy what they've done with this project. And if you're in the hunt for an alt-rock record that plays around with new metal sounds, old and new, you gotta check this one out. Alright, that's all I got. Bye!